Okay, so today is our O Day. For O Day, we are celebrating by wearing orange, okay? And we are also going to play outside, okay? So hopefully it's a really nice day. And after you finish your skill work, you can go outside and play because it is getting warmer outside and we all need a little bit more time outside. So I'm going to stop our introduction and I'm going to read you a story. So make sure you get nice and comfy. And again, when we are reading this story, we will be talking about the main idea. So, yesterday, I hope you had a lot of fun doing that work with guessing the main idea. Well, when we see pictures of things, it's not too challenging. But when we read it in a story, sometimes that's harder to think about what the main idea is. But we'll talk about that today. Stripes, and it's by David Sharon. I really like this book. Camellia Crane loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camellia was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room. She screamed too. "Oh, my heavens," she cried. "You are completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camellia was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Miss Crane felt Camelia's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camellia answered, "but just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You are not going to school today." Camellia was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camellia. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camellia told him. "I feel fine." "Well, then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment. That should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camellia. They called her Camellia Crayon and Knight of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camellia turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares appeared over her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors. Poor Camellia was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Miss Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Crane," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camellia home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid these stripes may be contagious." Camellia was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camellia. What she really wanted was for a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with four people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camellia. He squeezed, jabbed, trapped, and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chickenpox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Grop. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camelia took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she didn't feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Miss Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialists, he brought experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camelia was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down a lot of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camelia. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camelia was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camelia, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab. Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camelia. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Cranes were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camelia's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. You can see her right there, can't you? One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could close Camelia. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camelia groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed had become her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Miss Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. Oh boy. See her mouth in the bed, her nostrils. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camelia's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, this might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Miss Cream. Oh, my, no, replied the old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camelia. Camelia wanted a big heaping plate of lima beans, more than just about anything. But she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, said the old woman sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camelia watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, said the old woman with a smile. She took a handful of lima beans and popped them into Camelia's mouth. Mmm, said Camelia. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camelia, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camelia on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camelia wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of stripes again. The end. Okay, so in that story, Camellia was afraid to eat lima beans because she was afraid that her friends would make fun of her. Okay, so this one is really tricky, but the main idea of that story was to be yourself, right? Because she was so afraid to eat those lima beans because she thought people wouldn't like her if she did. And once she ate the lima beans, right, she was back to her normal self. Okay. Now, on that last page, there was some supporting details. She said eating lima beans couldn't possibly be as bad as having a case of the stripes, right? So those would be our details supporting that she learned that she should be herself. And you guys should be yourselves too. It doesn't matter what other people think of you, right? You guys are all so special and so unique because of who you are. That's one of the reasons I love that story. Okay, so today what you are going to do is you are going to do a skill work, and we're still working on those main ideas and details. And today you are going to read some sentences, okay? And you will have to choose what's the main idea, a detail, and the third detail. So the first thing is the title says apples and pumpkins. And here's my sentence. Apple and pumpkins are both fruits. They both have seeds. Apples and pumpkins are similar. They both can be made into pies. Okay, so if I'm thinking about apples and pumpkins, are they both fruits the main idea? No, not really, right? What about they have seeds? Is that the main idea of all these sentences? No. What about they can be made into pies? Nope, also not the main idea. The main idea is that they are similar. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out my strips. Okay, and you're going to have a chance to do this in a minute with your skill work, which is why I'm showing you this one here. So the main idea is that they are similar. Now, I do not have a glue stick next to me. I do have some tape, okay? But what I'm going to do is, if you're at home and you do happen to have a glue stick, use a glue stick and you're going to glue onto this one that says main idea, apples and pumpkins are similar. Now, similar means that they have a connection, they're close together and the same. So what makes them similar? That's going to be my details. So if I look at my detail strips, I have my tape right here. Okay, here's my detail strip. The first detail that proves that they're similar is that they both have seeds. So that's my detail number one. Okay, this next one says they both can be made into pies. Does that share that they're similar? Yeah. Okay. And lastly, apples and pumpkins are both fruits. Ah, so they're similar again. Okay. Now, when you're done, you need to reread it and double check your work. So this says apples and pumpkins are similar. They both have seeds. They both can be made into pies. Apples and pumpkins are both fruits. Okay. So if I didn't do it in the right order, it wouldn't really make sense. If I said they both have seeds and then they can both be made into pies, those are completely different things. It's talking about two different things. So you want to pick out the one sentence that all of the details kind of incorporate, and that would be your main idea. So I'm going to stop this. I'm going to go over your skill work real fast. It's the same exact thing. So I'll show you that in a second. It says things to do in the spring. So think, what would your main idea be? Tim likes to fly his kite at the park. That's your sentence number one. We can do many things in the spring. I plant flower seeds in my garden. Jan splashes in the rain puddle. So thinking about those 4 sentences, which one would be your main ideas and the 3 details? Okay, that is what you're working on today. Make sure you show an adult when you're done. All right, have a fabulous rest of your O Day, and I will see you all tomorrow to celebrate the letter P.